So another thing he talks about is like, if you live your life comfortable throughout your whole life, he's like, you will never really understand yourself. You will never really know what depths of character you possess. So another aspect of it is just being able to understand how you react in certain circumstances where you deal with disasters or calamities. Do you lash out? Do you internalize? And I think the whole journey is just having that awareness and accepting it, but trying to visit every moment with a fresh perspective, as challenging as that may be.
You texted me, my brother almost died and I saved his life. Tell me that story.
Just seeing them like put him under and just like put a tube in his mouth and the things come on and you're like, he became a vegetable, and I'm just sitting there and I'm just like deer in the headlights. You feel so powerless and you feel so vulnerable, and like just the emotion that overcame me where I'm just like, these tears are coming and I could just like feel my heart. Like, you want to talk about nihilism, like what is life, like what is anything, what does anything mean? And it's just like, you feel like these hands just like in a vice, just like doing this to your heart, and you're just watching this and you don't know what to do, you don't know what to say, and you're just witnessing it. And I get a ping on my phone and it's a voicemail. And this is crazy shit. It's a voicemail from a Jehovah's Witness who 6 months prior, I was stoned one night and I answered the call and I had a conversation with this dude. And he's just like, hey, I just want to talk to you about, Jesus. And I'm like, I was stoned one night. I'm like, I went to Catholic school. I'll talk about Jesus. Let's fire it up. So like, here's the gym and I'm taking a leak here and I hear like a humming noise. So I'm thinking it's the gym, and I just gradually look up and I look to my left and it's like over into the distance here, just like hovering, just floating there, where I'm like, what the like, I literally yelled it out loud, like, what the
What's up, guys? This time I sit down with Chris Cooper. Chris Cooper is an award-winning author, a performance coach, and a friend. He just released his debut novel, Crazy by Conscious, brought to you by Anxiety Press. It is a gripping read that dives deep into both the beauty and darkness of human nature, and I encourage you to make it your next read. On this episode of The Zach Show, which is Chris's third appearance, we dive into what it was like to write Crazy by Conscious, Chris saving his brother's life in the hospital, spending over 3 months in the ICU with his newborn baby daughter, Chris's unique insight into the collapse of Bed Bath & Beyond as a former employee, the influence of the philosophy of Jiddu Krishnamurti on Chris's writing, and Chris's first-hand encounter with a New Jersey drone, I think, that may have been a UAP. So without further ado, please enjoy this conversation with my friend Chris Cooper.
No, you sound good.
Okay.
I'm just fixated on these dials and buttons, and man, this
really is like a real Manhattan Project.
This is great.
Operation.
I feel like at any minute one of these things is going to blow up. Just like
3,
a landmine.
2, 1.
This is great, man.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is round 3.
Round 3.
With the esteemed Christopher Cooper.
The trilogy.
The trilogy.
This is The Dark Knight Rises here.
I'm rising right now, I'll tell you that. And we're only 30 seconds in right now. But Chris Cooper, you have just put out the wonderful novel, Crazy by Conscious.
Yeah.
I'm going to do 2 camera angles. Boom, right there.
Mm-hmm.
Boom, right there. Before we even get into the details, because you were kind enough to send me the first chapter, it is out right now in all bookstores, wherever you can get books, Amazon, Epstein's Island, Barnes and Noble, wherever you find books, you can get it. What the hell does it even feel like to write a book? Because I cannot even fathom doing a task 10% of that. Writing a newsletter makes me want to, do things to myself that I can't say on YouTube.
Yeah.
What does it feel like to write an entire book?
It's really challenging to describe, because it's like years of your life poured into that, especially this book here. I think the last time we spoke, I had just did a draft of the book, and at that time, it had a different title. It had, I mean, the building blocks of it were there, but there was so much more work that goes into it. And honestly, the shitty part about it is all the fun was done because
Mm,
once you finish that book, the arduous, you know, self, um, just the deplorable aspect of getting published begins because you have to now polish it up. You got to make it presentable. You got to make sure everything makes sense. So like this book is 433 pages,
mm.
and I wrote them in all different parts of my life for 4 years. It took me to write this book. Actually 5 years total till it got published. But you have to remember like plot details, years, time that passes through it. And at one point you're like, oh fuck, like I don't even know anymore. So you're improvising. Um, I guess the one way to describe it is it's fulfilling, but it's also depressing because you know that the
Mm.
fun is over and now all the shitty logistic aspects of it have to begin.
You mean once you're done writing the book, the
Mhm.
depressing
Oh
point
yeah, man.
begins?
Because think about it, you're in this creative phase where you just have this blank page and you're building a plot and like you're so like pumped because like you found out an awesome way to tie in something from chapter 2 to chapter 13. And then, like I love the conclusion of this book. It is just like
Mm.
it just punches you in the face. You don't see it coming. And it just everybody that's read it has just been like, the last chapter has left my jaw on the ground. And even my 2 reviews, the literary reviews on the book have described like the last chapter as like the crowning jewel of it. And just like, it's very unconventional. The last chapter, and I'm not going to give it away too much, but he's under the influence of psilocybin mushrooms.
Mm.
So the narrative is like, so it's a third person narrative, but it's like a free and direct narrative where like he's obviously on, he's hallucinating.
Yeah.
So the narrative is hallucinating as
Yeah.
well.
That's
So,
that's how I
uh,
was planning on ending this podcast, is
okay.
revealing to you that you're actually on a heroic dose of psilocybin mushrooms
So you
from what
slip
we've
it in.
been drinking. Exactly, yeah. But that sounds, I mean, the longest thing that I've ever written is a shitty short story that I sent to you a couple years ago. And I've always wondered, for someone who's writing a full-length novel, 400 plus pages, and let's say you're writing 3 pages a day. I know it doesn't go like that, but let's just say for this example, do you go into each day saying, I have no idea where I'm going to take this story, and there's 3 blank canvases in front of me? Or do you, before you even start the book, do you archetype a story arc where you go, all right, I have 3 to 4 plot points where I want things to build to. I'm not really sure how I'm gonna get there, but I'm just gonna fill in the spaces essentially. Like how do you do it?
So and I'm sure everybody's, every author's journey is different, but for me, when I started out this first chapter, it was just something I was just free versing. Like I was just working on some creativity, and I did the first chapter, and after the conclusion, I had an idea of where I wanted to go. I had an idea of a conclusion. Um, but in all honesty, I just kind of like, it was just stream of conscious, just writing. And through it, like I gotta be honest with you, this is the most creative I've ever been with anything I've ever written. Like, so I've written a lot of
What
short
what is
stories.
what do you mean by creative?
I was just letting it, like some people try to force something, and I was just letting this take me on the journey.
Mm.
I knew where, like
So you didn't
obviously,
feel like you were driving it. You felt like
no.
you were kind of a vessel along for the ride.
So the best way, feel like you need context to kind of understand where this book came
Yeah,
from, like how it was born.
absolutely.
So I started my serious writing journey in 2013 around there. And I wrote a manuscript called Fix It Broken. We talked a little bit about this. I had pitched that for a couple years. I never really got it sold. I had an offer, but they wanted to change the ending. Um, they took I didn't retain any rights to it. It was like a really shitty deal. And that was in 2017. And I turned it down because I just, I poured so much into it. And at that point I'm like, oh, I'll get it sold. I'll get it sold. And you're talking 2 years after that, and nobody would touch it. I wouldn't get any sort of response when I was pitching it, and it was getting rejection letters left and right, from the responses. And then I started writing short stories. So I was like, you know what? Let me build some sort of accolades. Let me get a reputation. Let me just get my foot in the door as a publisher. So I started writing short stories from 2019 to 2021, 20. And during that time, I'm like, you know what? Let me give another shot at writing the novel. I'm
Mm,
like, let me start new. I want it to be third person. The first one was first person. I wanted this one to be a little more sophisticated, a little bit edgier. At the time, like we were going through the pandemic, there was a lot of weird cultural phenomenons, and there was, like, such like, a development of, like, social media and the
mm.
pervasive elements of that, and we were all locked in, and people were just, like, pouring themselves into social media, so I wanted to capture a lot of that, but getting back to, how I crafted this novel is I wanted to just I felt like in the first book, I was forcing a lot of it. I was trying to make it marketable. I was trying to touch into, the elements to a successful plot and making sure like everything was just like had a nice ribbon around it. And this one, I just wanted to just be full creative send. There was some stuff that was working in my short stories, a lot of satire, was really building a reputation. My short story, Finn Almost Buys a Goldfish,
Yeah.
won an Emerging Writers Award. So I wanted to take elements of that, but I wanted to get, there was a lot of different elements I wanted to examine. And um, one of the main things, and we could talk about it, is like the proclivity or the desire to escape, like escapism. I think that's a
Mm.
big element in today's society. We're always trying to escape from our moments, our present moment, whether it's through social media, on our phone, an app, or something. Like we're just trying to escape from being essentially with our inherent selves, our thoughts and stuff. And we could get deeper into that.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny that you bring up escapism because I was the way that you're talking about escapism with writing. I was recently thinking about my desire to escape within podcasting
Mm.
because I fucking love podcasts. I love making podcasts, hosting podcasts, listening to the podcasts that I like to listen to. And then I was just sitting around the other day and I'll often put on a podcast when I do the dishes or, I have this like fucking like janky infrared sauna. It's basically like a cloth box
Okay.
that I sit in and I'll listen to podcasts. And I was just in my apartment sort of going around like cleaning up and I had another podcast on like some comedy podcast and I questioned whether at that moment I was listening to this podcast because I truly wanted to consume this content
Mm.
or I wanted to block out the content that was coming from my own brain. And I was using this podcast to just fill the space. And so I forced myself to just finish the cleaning up for the next 30, 35 minutes, whatever it took, without the podcast. And it's, for whatever reason, I just built up this wall within myself that having the space of my own thoughts for just 35 minutes would have been too nerve-wracking as opposed to just listening to this podcast, blocking it out. Like who needs like all these anxieties popping up or I didn't fucking buy a Christmas present for this person and it's almost 2025 or things going to take off next year, that bullshit. So I do think the escapism aspect is both uh, fascinating, but also useful, because I would suspect a lot of people that are listening to this episode right now also, and they enjoy the content they enjoy, but they also sometimes cross that line into like, I'm not doing this for enjoyment right now. I'm just trying to escape my own thoughts.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's honestly, if you were to, get through this book, that is a big aspect of the novel, is like our desire to want to escape. I mean, we are constantly consuming content um at just, this rapid pace constantly, whether it's, phone, TV, or just, audible or listening to things. Like, it's just, we're constantly consuming. And some of that is good, but if you get to a point where you're just consuming, you have this like insatiable kind of appetite where you're never actually alone with your own thoughts, because like you don't know where your thoughts are going to take you. They're
Mm,
going to, you could ruminate, you could obsess over certain things. Um and honestly, that's a lot of the philosophy of this book, is um just that tendency to either, want to escape through consumption.
yeah.
But as I was writing the book, like, that was essentially my escape.
Mm,
The irony of it is like I'm writing about escapism through escapism,
yeah.
like.
But you're also creating. Me, I was just in that example, I'm just passively consuming content to escape my own thoughts. Right now, I'm sure there's a level to which this conversation is providing a form from escape of escape for me, but I think that's a much more healthier form of escape, is through proactive creation rather than just letting the world be told to you.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, from a subjective standpoint, is like you can create something, but is it worthwhile? You know what I mean? Like, some things have more value, or have more merit than others. So I do think that, there is something to creating that is a little more productive, but on the other side of things, it's like, or is that just a distraction, or is that just some sort of validation to engage in escapism? And I'm not saying there's a right answer or not. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
like, there's so many different ways to approach things. Um, and
Yeah. Let me let me think about that for a second. Is there, like, I'm trying to think if there's ever, if I could say that I've ever been purely creating for the form, for the like the desire to create. But I don't know if that's true, because even when I'm in a flow state, let's say during a conversation like this, or if I'm editing and like an hour and a half passes by and like, oh shit, I was so, there's still the background thoughts of, I hope this podcast does well. I hope people click on this. I hope they listen to it. I hope, that people fucking call me a piece of shit in the comments, because that's the only way to get traction in the YouTube
engagement.
algorithm, is
Yeah.
to just polarize the base of your listeners and have them threaten to kill each other in the comments. But I don't know if I've ever, I don't know if I've ever been a part of creation in a pure sense as a creator. I don't know if I could do that at, without, like, maybe even if I was on some sort of ayahuasca and psilocybin cocktail where my ego was just completely blown away, maybe
Mhm.
that would be a pure form of creation. But I don't think I could do it in a mind state like I am right now, or adjacent to where I am right now. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I do think I'm always subconsciously aware of,
A goal or some
it's
sort
a
of
goal, yeah,
driving
and
motive.
I
Yeah.
try to rid myself of that, but, like, I can't escape the fact that underlying this, there's the hope that this episode does well, that this turns into a flourishing career, that I get to meet more and more cool people, that, like, all these things that aren't necessarily, like, hard goals, like 100,000 downloads, or like, fucking, I wanna record an episode with Oprah. I was about to say P Diddy, but
Maybe not the best
record
time.
episodes for different reasons. You know, maybe in jail do some sort of tell all when he decides to flip and become a rat and just tell the full story. I'd consider that. But yeah, I don't know. Do you feel like you can ever get to that point where you're fully in creation mode?
Well, I think it's really interesting, and I'm gonna try my best not to tie everything back to this novel, but it is really appropriate
Yeah,
because
that's what it's literally the
r-
background
right.
of today's podcast.
But it's weird because the way this dialogue is shaping up, it's so many connections to the book. So,
Yeah,
um, just to kind of go off of what you were talking about, like, do you think that? So my sort of take on that is eventually, if you reach certain amount of followers, you get a certain amount of views, you interview that person that you always desired to do. Is that going to be enough? Right? Or
yeah,
is it always gonna just escalate? Are you ever gonna be, like, 100% content with whatever goal you had initially?
yeah,
Um, and I feel like that kinda applies to me with this novel, whereas when I started writing this book, I really didn't think it was ever gonna get published. 'Cause I'm like, I couldn't get the first one published, um, and I'm like, "This content is so much edgier, it's so much bolder, there's nothing like this out there." I'm like, "Nobody's gonna fucking touch this." But I'm like, "You know what? I'm just gonna write it." I'm like, "'Cause I think it's good. I think it's great." Like, and that was my whole approach with this book. I never thought it was gonna get published.
yeah,
I really never did. Um, and I think that's when we create when we are not driven by motives or goals or some sort of validation, I think that's when we create the best content.
yeah.
And it just goes to show you with this book, like, and don't get me wrong, like, I pitched this book 100 fucking times, and people were like, "Get the fuck out of here with this shit," you know? And I had to change the title. So,
Would they say an industry thing to you? Was
oh
there,
yeah.
because I think those are hilarious, like the insider industry phrases that people will say to reject you, but they won't actually come out and say they don't like it. They'll just say
Oh yeah.
like you're
Euphemistic
good.
language.
We're just like we're going in a different direction right
It'll
now. Or
say, "It's not what we're looking for at this time."
yeah.
That is, like, ubiquitous
And you're like, this
across
is the
literature.
time that I'm sending it to you though.
Right.
So or give me a future time and I'll send it then.
Yeah,
Then they'll
yeah.
just make up another excuse.
Yeah, I mean, it's all, euphemistic language to just not be direct and to not hurt people's feelings, but I mean, I got 100 of those rejection letters for this book. I've been pitching this book for a couple years, um, and the initial title was called Between the Crazy and Conscious. Um,
It's a bit wordy.
right, right.
I love Crazy by Conscious.
Well, it's much more succinct, it's much more compelling,
And
it's
I feel like it's just like the title is almost like two jagged peaks separated
mhm,
by like Crazy by Conscious, like the cutting of the sea.
mhm. The alliteration, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That
Well,
exact. I'm just using like three sentences where you're like, yeah, it's alliteration. We get
it's
it. It's
it's a
two words that sound the same at the start.
yeah. No, it's a great literary device. Um, but what I was saying about the title is I pitched it 99 times with Between the Crazy and Conscious. And then I was getting to the point where I'm like, "You know what? This book is never gonna get published. I'll just stick to writing short stories. I don't give a shit." And this was end of June this past
Mm.
year, and I'm like, "You know what? I found this one other publisher. They like edgier works. They're not like so they're not into conformity." And that's the publisher I needed to go with. But I'm like, "You know what? Let me change this title." I'm like, most books that are successful have 3 words, something like much more succinct. And the content, it started out as between the crazy and conscious. So it's like you're the content is kind of between the two aspects. But then I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, that's not really the book. The book essentially is derived from Ernest Hemingway's quote that happiness in intelligent people is the rarest thing I know, right?
Mm.
And it's like the more intelligent you are, the more depressed you are because you
Yeah.
have this sense of awareness. And that's what this book essentially is. It's like the more conscious you become of like yourself, the world, things that are going on, relationships, dynamics, like the crazier you become. So I
Mm.
just changed that title. I sent this last um query letter off where I'm like, this is it. Last one. I don't give a shit. I'm done. If this thing lives in my computer like the other book, then it's fine. And fucking 2 weeks later, I open my email and it's like, awesome. Let's make this happen. And I'm
Mm.
like, are you fucking serious? Like, just total disbelief, you know?
Yeah. What company is that again?
So they're called Anxiety Press.
Mm.
They're a publisher in Chicago, Illinois. Shout out to the publisher, editor, designer, Cody Sexton. He is an absolute stud, creative genius, really collaborative. Whereas my first book deal, it was just like, hey, fuck you. We're gonna tell you what we're doing. We're
Mm.
changing your ending. We're you know what I mean? Like they were not into collaboration. Whereas he
Yeah.
was like, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? What do you think about this? Like it was such a in the past where it would be such a shitty process, it just felt like such a creative, artistic process. And, obviously you see this book and you're like, holy shit, like, what is this?
Yeah.
Like you have these vibrant colors, this face that just stares out at you. Like
Can you
this.
tell the story of your friend putting this book on his
Yeah.
nightstand, what you were
Yeah.
telling me before? Because that really gives people, even if you're just listening to this, it'll give you an idea of what the cover is like.
Yeah. Yeah. So I have a friend. I'm gonna shout him out, Sean Hart Jr. He was one of my
Shout
friends
out.
from college. Cool guy. Really down to earth, really ride or die type of guy. Which is really hard to come by in today's climate. But he had purchased my book and he started reading it. And he called me the other day. We were talking, and he's like, "Hey, man, like, so pumped about the book. Been reading it." And he's like, "But I gotta be honest with you, man. The fucking cover is giving me nightmares." And I'm like, "Really?" I'm like, well, And he's like elaborating on it. He's like, I have it on my nightstand. I wake up in the middle of the night and it's like pitch black, but that glossy cover is just glowing in the moonlight. And he's like, I come back and all I see is that face just like staring at me from a
Yeah.
distance. And he's like, and then I lay down, I go to sleep, and that face is fucking haunting me. And he's
Yeah.
like, I've got to put it in my drawer. And he's like, but you know what? It makes sense. It's like it's the personification of anxiety. Like you look at that face and it's just like it's kinda stoic, but it's kinda like it has this element to it where you're super uncomfortable. You have
Yeah.
this brain exposed where it's just like it almost represents like the obsession, the that OCD nature of just like every detail you're obsessing on. And then it's
Yeah.
just like the bulging eyes where it's like all this is overwhelming where like I'm in this perpetual state of panic. And then you have this like neutral expression where it's like you don't know how to interpret it, but it's just like the combination, the visual of it just it just kind of sets you off into like this sort of panic nature.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. It is. And I'm just looking at the poster cover behind you. The eyes, especially, like you said, they're aware to a hyper aware point where it's like sometimes you have a poster and the eyes are wide and it's more of a 1,000 yard stare where the poster's kind of looking through you. With this, it looks like the complete opposite side of the spectrum where like this person is hyper aware of itself, like this being, that moment where anxiety hits you. And I like how the brain is exposed too, because I've had moments of panic where I'm like, are all of my organs in my body? Like literally you start to like feel it too much. You're like, did my kidney just fly out of my stomach? Is my heart feels like it's coming up my throat? I think my top head flap might be open right now. I have no idea. Like you're just like so much
Exposed.
like the
Yeah.
extreme pulsating
Mhm.
of the panic running through your veins. If someone told me like, oh, your head's off, I'd be like, oh, that makes sense. That's what it feels like right
Right.
now.
Right. Yeah. I think, a lot of times you can't, there is no visual or there's no physical representation of a panic or anxiety. You can see somebody and physically they look fine, but on the inside, you could be a mess,
Yeah.
and I think that this cover does a great job of it. Um, just kind of setting that visual for what a hyper awareness and anxiety driven, just being so conscious where it just drives you crazy, where you're
Yeah.
in this panic state. Um, but I don't want people to get the wrong idea about this book is that it's not just like shock value. It's not to just make you uncomfortable. There are a lot of glimmers of, profound truths to it. There's a lot of philosophy in it.
Yeah.
Um, one of the biggest philosophical elements of this book surrounds Jiddu Krishnamurti, who's an
Mm,
Indian philosopher. Um, and, his philosophy, contrary to like what we talked about in the past of, absurdism, nihilism, existentialism, all these ideologies, these philosophical ideas of like making sense of the world. Um, his approach is like, there is no making sense of anything.
yeah.
The only thing to make sense of is yourself. And his whole takeaway is like having freedom from the known. So his big, you know, pontification of like existence and what troubles us is thought, but not so much thought as it is like the past. So
Mm,
we're either fixated on the past or we're either like we're either obsessed on the future, right? These two elements of thought, we're very rarely in the moment. Like we're existing, but we're at the same time we're so much in our heads
yeah.
that like moments that are happening are passing without us knowing. Like we're living most of our lives in our heads,
Yeah.
you know?
To the point where being present almost feels like anxiety sometimes, where you're just like, I've had those moments where you can spend 3/4 of a day just either thinking into the future of something you're working on or a relationship, whatever it is. And then you're thinking about things that you did in the past. And then you have like 30 seconds of just being in your own body.
Right.
And that's like a panic state where you're like, holy shit, like I spent the first 9 hours of today without actually noticing myself thinking, without being conscious of that stream of rivers of thought. And I wanted to go back to Jiddu. It's Jiddu Krishnamurti. That's how you pronounce it?
Yeah.
Or
I
John
mean,
Krishnamurti.
yeah. Yeah. So
So
I
you
think,
texted me about him before before we started recording, and you said that he was a big element to the book.
yeah.
So this sort of this dichotomy between thinking about the future, thinking about the past, would you say that's his main underlying philosophy? What like the sort of like what underpins the outflow of his philosophical thought?
So what's really interesting about him is he was technically he started out in philosophy to examine theosophical elements. So something he wanted to explore the philosophy in connection with God, and then during his process or his learnings, as he said, he came to the conclusion that we have to reject all ideologies, including God. Um, and he came back to this whole overarching theme. And listen, he's been a philosopher. He died in the late '80s.
Yeah.
And he's been philosophizing, or he did for at least 30 years, and he had a lot of different takes. But one of the crux of this book, or the nucleus of the philosophy of this book, is based on his teachings of the freedom from the known. And the character in the book is actually reading his book,
Mm.
Krishnamurti. One of the characters, his name is James, and we can talk a little bit about how I came to create this character. But he's reading this book and he's trying to help the protagonist, um, helping him distance himself from his thoughts. And he gives him this book, and there's elements to the book where he's reading it and you're learning about the philosophy, but then there's elements where it's indirect, where he's actually, through the plot, he's getting obsessed with the past, or he's fixated on the future. So it kind of has that duality of it, where it's like, he's learning about it, but he's actually living it. Um, but getting back to
Yeah.
Krishnamurti, or however you want to pronounce his name. Y-
Krishnamurti,
yeah, dude,
the plural of the
that's
Krishnamurtis.
the thing about being a writer, is like, I only know what the words look like, but like when it comes to pronouncing them, like it's a whole other element to the game. Um, but I just found that during the time of writing this book that, I was very much into absurdism, with Albert Camus, and I found that Krishnamurti's sort of approach was a lot more logical, and the hypocrisy of it is Krishnamurti's is always about reject all ideologies, don't cling to anything. So it's like, if you cling to his idea, it's like technically you're doing
Yeah.
what he said not to. But
You're like
it,
creating these mini deities from these philosophers
right,
along the way. And Krishnamurti's saying, like, fuck all that, essentially, like, create your own path.
yeah, but he's even like, he rejects the fundamental elements of psychology, where he's like, I don't give a shit about, the conscious, the unconscious, or the subconscious mind. He's like, in psychology, they say you can't really access the unconscious mind. The subconscious mind, you can, you kind of know behaviors and patterns and conditions from it. But he's saying that the more aware you can be with yourself in the present moment, he promulgates for this state of hyper awareness, to understanding yourself. And I find that that is such a crucial aspect to just getting older.
Mm.
And as we're on this quest for meaning, we tend to cling to religion or philosophies, or whatever else we want to fill the void with, where I find that trying to understand yourself is the fundamental element of just like getting to your ultimate destination as a human, as a person. Um,
Does he talk about what examples of hyper aware states are, or does he define hyper awareness? Because I feel like it could be easy to confuse,
mhm.
anxiety with hyper awareness, or maybe that's a part of it. I don't know how he defines it, but what does he say is the state of hyper awareness?
So one of the things that he really kind of postulates is this idea of that we are constantly in fear. We are fearful beings, and not that we fear this, we fear that. We fear the unknown, right? But so we're constantly clinging to the known. Like every single, so just to kind of, it's very complex to understand. So I'm just gonna like kind of give you this
Yeah,
scenario.
give me the
Right.
dumbed down 5-year-old version. So I seriously, so I'll be able
So
to
right
bite on
now,
it. Yeah.
your existence, right? You're looking at me. Everything that you're saying right now is based on everything that you've learned in your life. You've been conditioned right now to ask certain questions, or to perceive my answers, or to everything everything about you is based on the past, right? You're a culmination of everything that's happened to you, right?
Mm,
But during that process, you've been conditioned to say certain things, to react certain ways, to give positive reinforcement, and to either nod your head or to say yes or yeah. So what he's suggesting is to understand you've been conditioned, to understand your behaviors, your how you react to certain things,
mm.
and to try to like acknowledge that, but to exist in the moment as if you have no inclinations, if you have no intimations from the past, to exist in the moment without deriving anything from your past.
Mm.
Like you're a fucking newborn baby right now.
So I feel like it sometimes.
Right?
When we were setting up the podcast, I was like, "Damn, I'm trying to get all the angles right." I'm like, I might have the brain of a 8-month-old baby right now,
I do have
trying
to
to set all
comment.
this up.
I do have to comment on you. That was the most impressive thing I've ever seen in my life.
You
For
need
all
to
of
get
yous
out
at
more.
home,
You're also a newborn father, so
yes,
you
yes.
haven't been out of the house much.
Oh,
The
dude.
next person you see on the street will be more impressive than me. I promise you that.
It was quite the spectacle
Yeah.
from everybody listening to this. Zach just came in here. He just redesigned the office. He moved stuff around.
Blew out a couple walls.
He's got more wires in here than you think that somebody's on their deathbed.
Yeah.
At any moment, this place could just catch up in flames.
Yeah, and I
So I'm fully
purposely I
prepared
put
for that.
all the wires just in a sequence that I can easily, if you say anything that goes against my conditioning, I could easily yank on the wires and choke you to restrict you from uttering words that I don't want you to say because it
He's
contradicts my conditioning.
he's got me sitting on a double-sided dildo as we speak.
Yeah,
That could just shock me if I say the wrong thing. So I'm just trying to be.
that's true. It's one of those rocking chairs where like you rock back and the dildo goes up. So when you see Chris in the video version rocking back and forth constantly, it's because he's really enjoying
Oh
himself.
man, yeah.
But I do want to go back to that aspect of conditioning because and I at a super basic level I can understand where that idea is coming from, where everything that I'm doing, everything that I'm saying at some form is unoriginal. People have done it before. It's either I'm either doing something that I've directly been told to do, which is what happens for a lot of the earliest years of your life,
Mhm.
or I'm doing a variation of something that I've consumed that sort of like went through my own filter. And maybe I think I'm being original, but I'm actually just like an amalgamation of all of my influences, and influences are conditioning. What I will say is, how do you completely separate from your conditioning? Because wouldn't the very acknowledgement of being conditioned and the way that you become hyper aware of that be a product of the way that you were conditioned, where your hyper awareness might look different than mine because of the way we each been conditioned by our own biologies, environments, situations?
Yeah, and honestly, I think that's the whole like conundrum of it all. And that's the beauty of it. There's no fucking right or wrong answer. There's no direct answer. It's just getting you out of your head, getting you out of your thoughts, right? Um, just making sure that you're visiting everything with a fresh perspective where you're not letting any predispositions affect how you think on certain things, whether it's a bias or a personal opinion, or you hate this because of something that happened in the past, or you like this because it reminds you of something this. It's like I don't think there's like a set way. I think it's just having that awareness to understanding yourself. How do you react when things don't go your way, right? So another thing he talks about is like if you live your life comfortable throughout your whole life, he's like you will never really understand yourself. You will never really know what depths of character you possess. So another aspect of it is just being able to understand how you react in certain circumstances where you deal with disasters or calamities. Do you lash out? Do you internalize? And I think the whole journey is just having that awareness and accepting it, but trying to visit every moment with a fresh perspective,
Mm.
as challenging as that may be.
Yeah.
But I think that's what it's all about. It's all about living in the moment, and that's like such a cliche to say because Tolle Eckhart, kind of has that book of the power of the now, but it's kind of like that surface level of like, yeah, let's live in the now. Let's fucking really enjoy ourselves, and it's like, yeah, but like, do you possess that mental fortitude to really you know, take that deep plunge into your psyche to understand like you've been conditioned to so many aspects where you need
Yeah.
to try to separate yourself from that. And again, I don't think there's really any right or wrong answer. I think it's just trying to get yourself into that.
Like it's a practice. I feel like anything that's worthwhile has some repetitive aspect to it that you could do repetitions like mindfulness or like acknowledging conditioning some form of that because like what state of being can you truly put yourself in that's not or what meaningful state of being can you truly put yourself in if that's not a form of repetition? Because if you could just like snap your fingers and, like eat or like hold a mug that says eat, pray, love, and you're drinking coffee from it, looking out at the
I prefer
farm,
live, laugh, love, but
live, laugh, love, whatever your choice of, the cliche memorabilia is,
mhm.
which I enjoy from time to time. But if it was as easy as just holding a mug that says that and then looking out into the sunset, you're like, oh, this is it. Now I have like 3 hours of this being mindful. The clock starts now. That wouldn't really be a meaningful state of mind because it could be achieved so easily.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's honestly, this stuff is like a lifelong journey. And again, like I'm never really, trying to advocate for a certain way or not. I think certain things have shaped me since the last time we've talked.
Yeah.
Um, just in terms of philosophy and things that essentially we're looking for comfort.
Yeah.
Like we're looking for meaning and understanding and fulfillment, and all these things bring some sort of comfort, but it's not till we're fully uncomfortable do we really kind of understand things better, as contradictory as that is.
Yeah.
But I think that's the whole journey of really self-discovery is
Yeah.
just looking at different things.
Well, let's get into one of those things that has no doubt shaped your life since we last spoke on the podcast. You texted me when I asked you, let me know what you want to talk about. And usually people say, like, oh, like general, like, oh, I want to talk about creativity. I want to talk about, fucking shoes. I want to talk about dildos, whatever it is, like just sort of like a broad thing. And one of the things that you sent me was, quote, my brother almost died and I saved his life. Tell me that story.
So
Does it involve a dildo?
no, no,
You
no.
bring him back.
And honestly, I wish it did, because that would be the comic relief that I desire. Yeah. But let me use the restroom.
Mm,
Now, I remember the first interview I pissed 4 times.
yeah.
So the goal here is only 3 times.
All right, I'll
All right.
allow it.
So let me
Let me
use the restroom.
Okay, let me unleash you for those who are just listening. Put some slack on the
Just
the
let me know
microphone
which
leash.
buttons I need to press here to
Yeah,
escape.
go for it. Yeah.
All right, dude. All right, I'm logging back into the metaverse.
All right, let me just
Yep.
wash my mouth out
Yep.
from that piss.
Yep. That was good, man.
That was tasty.
Hey, it's, when they say if you're on a deserted island or you can't access water, eventually you have to drink your own piss to
Yeah.
get some sort of nutrients.
If you drink your own piss,
Mhm.
are you just absorbing more conditioning from your own body? The
The
condition your body's
toxins.
already conditioned the nutrients.
It's
Is
a
it better to just release that conditioning and die sooner or keep the cycle of conditioning through drinking your own piss
it's a
going and live as a less conscious human being?
it's a quite thought-provoking metaphor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, s
Mhm.
speaking of, pissing in people's mouths,
Great transition. Yes.
Because I don't know what this story involves.
Yeah.
Maybe, your brother, he saved his life somehow. So I don't know exactly how much piss this story involved. But you texted me, my brother almost died and I saved his life.
Mm.
Tell me that story.
Yeah. And like, this is not, when I texted that, I don't want you to get the idea of like, I'm trying to purport myself as some sort of hero or anything like that.
I
It
already
was-
thought that. So you don't have to worry about that. You're in my phone as hero.
Hero number one, number one.
There's not
person.
even a number. It's just hero.
Just hero.
You don't need a number if you're number one.
Yeah. So this was 2022, and my mom called me, and so my brother is 10 years older than me. So at the time, I was, let's see, obviously I'm a writer, I'm not a mathematician, but I think I was 35, and so he was 45.
Mm.
My mom called me in the morning. She's like, "Hey, I got this weird message from a girl, and she had said that she was with Brian, and he's in the hospital now, and we're trying to reach somebody, and please call me back." And she was like, "Oh, I think it's a scam or something like that." I'm like, "Oh, well, let me listen to the message." So I listened to it, and I'm like, This sounds oddly specific. She sounds like kind of distressed." So, long story short, she called her back. Turns out my brother had a stroke.
Mm.
And that morning he woke up and he was paralyzed on the side of his body, couldn't move. And an ambulance came and took him to the hospital.
Yeah.
And
This girl you obviously hadn't met before, or else you would have
no,
recognized
no.
her voice.
Right. So it was just, some girl that he was with.
Yeah.
And, you know, essentially she saved his life, because she's the one that called the ambulance and brought him to the hospital. And so I went to see him that day, and, he looked pretty bad. He couldn't swallow. And this is, surreal. You hear of strokes, you don't really know what to think. And so you go there and he's sitting up, and, he's a healthy guy. He doesn't drink,
Yeah.
he doesn't smoke, which is weird because it's like, how the fuck is
To
this
have a
guy?
stroke at 45
He
without drinking or
works out
smoking.
all the time. He runs marathons, plays basketball, does jujitsu. Like, you're
Yeah.
talking the pinnacle of health. So that's a whole other,
Yeah.
conspiracy to dig into. But so go there. He looks fine. I go and see him, and I leave, and then I start talking to my parents the next day, and they're just like really, and they're older, but they're obviously concerned. But I can also tell they're not retaining like the medical diagnosis and things that the doctors are saying. And I'm like, fuck, like that's not good. And so the next day I go and I'm with my aunt, and so first of all, he gets discharged, or he doesn't get discharged. He gets moved to like the next step of being discharged from the hospital. So it's like, I forget the actual term, but it's like a floor where 4 patients are seen by 1 nurse, right?
Yeah.
So I go there, it's like 4 o'clock or 3 o'clock, and I'm there with him the whole day. And I notice he's like getting worse. Like, he can't swallow. He looks like a fragment of himself. And finally, it's like 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night. And, I'm looking at my aunt, and I'm like, something is not right here. Like, it looks like he's getting worse. It looks like something's going to happen. I'm like, I don't feel comfortable leaving here.
Mm.
So finally I get the doctor, and I'm like, and it's a fucking chore trying to get a doctor there,
Yeah.
because it's like, he's a step away from being discharged. I'm like, he does not look like he's ready to go fucking home.
Yeah.
So I get a doctor in there, and I'm like, "Doc, like, you gotta fucking look at him. Like, he looks significantly worse from 5 hours ago." So he's taking a look at him, he's listening to him, and he just like comes back, and he's just like, "Yeah, he's on the verge of cardiac arrest." And I'm like, "What the fuck does that mean?" And they're like, well, we have to intubate him. We have to move him down. Like he could die.
Yeah.
And I'm like, holy fucking
And
shit.
the only reason the doctor knows that is because you
Right.
got a
Is
doctor
I'm like,
to
dude,
say,
I
"Hey,
can't
can
leave
you
him.
go look at this guy
Right.
in a hospital that you're supposed to be checking on regularly anyway?"
Right.
So he could have just slipped into cardiac arrest right there, and the doctor would have just, been like, "Sorry, dude, that's it.
And
My
just
bad."
right. Right. So
Or
and at
not
that
even my bad. They wouldn't have said my bad because then you could sue the hospital. They just would have been like, "Oh, this happens."
well, to think about it, it's like retrospectively, if I wasn't there to at least say that, right? Listen, this story gets fucking
Yeah.
significantly worse.
Yeah.
Um,
Sorry to sidetrack.
no, but that's like a crucial moment where you're like, what? Like he was about to go home in a couple days or a day or two, and now he's going to be intubated. They're moving him down, and
Yeah.
so you don't have time to react there, but um so they move him downstairs and they're like, "All right, we have to go into the ER, emergency room because obviously we need to get him sedated and put under." And it's like one of those moments that's like indelible in my mind and I think about it now and it's like it's something that I can describe in exquisite fucking detail. It's like I show up in the emergency room and he only hears intubated, and I think he thought like incubated, and it was during that time where COVID happened, and it was like if you're put on a ventilator, like that means a death sentence. So I think that was going through his
Yeah.
mind.
What year is this?
This is 2022.
2022. Okay.
So they're putting him on a
Yeah.
ventilator. He can't breathe, he can't swallow. And like there's a moment where they're trying to and I'm sitting there and I have a fucking like crystal clear view of this. And it's like my big brother, he's in a bed and they're sedating him, right? And he's like ripping off the arm things. He's in this like drug state of panic. And it's just like, they're like, it's okay. We have to do this. And like, I'm trying to talk and like, I could just like the tears are coming out of my like eyes and I'm not even aware of it. And it's just like this harrowing image of him just like almost fighting for his life,
Yeah.
and they're just like
Well, he
trying to
literally is at that moment. Yeah.
but the scary part is like he he was so scared, to see that, written all over him, not understanding what's happening because he's like in this, feeble state and he's getting these drugs put into him. And, you're trying to explain it to him, but, you're in that state where you're just like, I don't know what's going on. I heard a word here. I heard this. I heard ventilator, and just seeing them like put him under and just like put a fucking tube in his mouth and the things come on and you're like he became a fucking vegetable,
Yeah.
and I'm just sitting there and I'm just like deer in the headlights, you feel so fucking powerless and you feel so vulnerable and like, just the emotion that overcame me where I'm just like, these tears are coming and I could just like feel my heart. Like, you want to talk about nihilism? Like, what is life? What is anything? What does anything mean? And it's just like, you feel like these hands just like in a vice, just like doing this to your heart. And you're just
Yeah.
watching this and you don't know what to do. You don't know what to say. And you're just witnessing it. Um, and it was just like, it was the beginning of like a terrible, like obviously like just atrocious sort of experience, but a lot to take away from it. Whereas, the next day, from that day forward, I'm like, I can't not be with him. I can't not be in the hospital to make sure this doctor's doing this nurse is doing this. It's like I took on that role of like my parents are the caregivers, like your whole life, but like you get to a point where they're not equipped anymore to deal with this, to
Mhm.
step in and, I took on that role because I'm like, what's the alternative? Like he could fucking die,
Yeah.
and like you have a brother,
Yeah.
right? Like
Too.
just imagine where, you are not like your parents are not the go-to anymore. It's like you are the person to step into that role.
Yeah.
you know, and you take on this survival mode where it's like you're not going to take any shit from, you know, if I don't understand what you're telling me, doctor, you're going to tell me it fucking 5 more times till
Yeah.
I understand it, you know.
Yeah.
And it's a tough line to
Yeah, you're
walk.
you're now the advocator for your brother's life.
And it's also a tricky sort of, you know, role to inherit because you don't want to alienate the medical staff. You don't want to be too much of a dick where they're like, fuck
Mhm.
this dude. But it's like that certain give and take and picking your battles.
Yeah.
Um, and it was, you know, it was a 3-month journey of being there every day. And he got a fucking trach put in his neck, like a trach, you know?
Is that, like, where they cut open the
Yeah.
esophagus and put the tube
Yep.
directly in, like, for feeding and breathing and
Yeah.
stuff? Yeah.
Yeah. And like fast forward to today, trach is gone. He's, you know, he's still dealing with side effects, you know, obviously of a stroke, but he's working out again. He's working, he's driving, he's doing all these things. But it was like this 3-month process for me was so it was so formative because you got to see like this outside view of somebody that was a vegetable, right? That over time, you know, like it gave you perspective on how we take for granted all these little things.
Mm.
Like he couldn't eat for a month. He was on a feeding tube, and the only thing he wanted to do is he would tell me, and he would write. He couldn't talk, so he would just write shit down, and he'd just hand it to me. I was like, I just can't wait to eat. I can't. I want a burger, you know. And it's like you don't realize how good things are until that shit's taken away from you. And for me, it was like mind opening where I'm like, holy shit, just being able to walk or like go and get a burger and just like enjoy little fucking things that we take for granted. Like it gave me this profound vantage of just like how the littlest things in life are the best fucking things, you know? Um, and it's something that like really shaped me because you know, you get so conditioned to just like have everything that you want and to like being able to go work out. Like it's just such a novel thing. Like, yeah, I would call it a workout in, but like imagine if you couldn't do that shit. Like imagine if you were
Yeah.
confined to a bed. You couldn't talk. Like us having dialogue right now. Like that's a fucking privilege, you know, to being able to talk. Like just not being able to do these little things in life, it gave me it was so transcendent, and it's something I think about every day when I have such a shitty day. It's like, well, imagine if you couldn't fucking walk. Imagine if you couldn't talk or you couldn't eat or you, like, spent all day in a bed, and it was just it's just an experience that, like, I feel like has helped me because it was I had such a from 2022 to 2024 right now, I had major shit happen to me. Whereas like the first couple times we talked, like, you know, I quoted philosophy and, you know, all these kind of things to cling to. And it's like, man, you don't fucking know what you're going to cling to until shit happens.
Mm.
You know, you could have this aspect, this look on things. And it's like, man, you don't know if that's going to be what
Well,
gets you through things.
in those moments where you see your brother essentially on not life support, but
No,
the
it was life
ventilator, was it
support, yeah.
life support?
Yeah,
So
man.
ventilator,
Yeah.
the trachea,
Mhm.
you're watching your brother look like a zombie could easily, you know, in a lot of situations, especially during that time during COVID, could easily a doctor walks in one day and tells you your brother's not there anymore.
Yeah.
What did you find yourself clinging to in those moments? Was it certain quotes? Was it flashbacks of certain experiences with your brother, or like what were the things that your mind would revisit as a stronghold to not just go completely fucking sideways in those moments?
Yeah, it was I will tell you, man, the nihilism was a constant battle. It was like Like how why does this shit like this happen? You know, like somebody like him, like I've done so many drugs in my life. Like, obviously I work out like crazy right now. I'm a little bit healthier, but I'm like, you look at somebody like him that has done everything by the book, and it's just like, how does this happen to somebody? So
Um,
you get that cynical sort of outlook
yeah, it's
where
like
it's
that. Look, that person's healthier than me. What's the point if he's
right,
about to die? If he just had a stroke,
right.
what's the point of all this shit?
So you get that pessimism, that nihilistic outlook. But for me, it's weird. It started out like that, but as I got to see him progress, it was like the only way to live your life is day by day. You can try to plan out the future. You can have 5-year goals. You can have 10-year goals, but shit like that, you're not guaranteed.
Mm,
And all it takes is one decision, one instance, one event, and that carpet is pulled out from underneath you. And I think I really learned to live my life, have a general idea, like, sure, plan that out, but you can only live day by day. Um, and it kind of brought me back to like living in the moment, like having a good meal, but not like it's weird. There's a fine line because it's like you don't want to make pleasure the motive of everything you do. And so if
mm,
we talk about being able to eat or to like go and work out, like, you don't want everything to be derived from pleasure and feeling good, but you want to be aware of how privileged it is to be able to do these things, to be grateful for these things. Um, and I don't think that aspect allowed me to cling on to things as one of the more traumatic events happened to me later on, like a year and a half later, and that was like the premature birth of my daughter.
yeah. I want to
Yeah,
get into that. I just had
yeah,
a couple questions about your brother.
yeah.
So, did they ever give you a reason for the stroke? Because he's 45 years old, works out like a demon, does jujitsu, eats relatively healthy, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Did they ever give you some sort of source for what happened?
I don't know. They really didn't. They said that he had some sort of clot that was building up, um, and we can speculate on it. I know that he was involved in a car accident a month before.
Mm,
I also know that he had got, the vaccine, the COVID vaccine,
yeah,
not too long before that as well. So there's a lot of possibilities,
yeah.
permutations, but there's really no set, cause for it.
Do they know where it breaks off in the body? Could they
It
tell
was in
you?
his neck.
It was in his neck.
Yeah.
Okay, so like a clot in some vein in his neck broke
Yeah.
off and then made its way to his brain.
Right. Right.
Okay,
But again,
but they couldn't tell you this is the source.
no, no. And that's why it's like, how does somebody that's this healthy, undergo, how does that happen to somebody like this where it's like, you could do everything by the book, you can, work out, eat healthy, do everything, but you're just not guaranteed the next day. Um, and we're still looking for answers, and I think that's part of the process of healing. But there's really no definitive answer. Um, we could go off of based on certain things. I have a different idea from what he may think, and it's one of those things right now where it like happened, so I think he's still in that process of recovering, where I don't think he likes to harp on, what might have caused it.
Yeah,
Um, and granted it happened, you can't take it back. So, um, but again, there's no real definitive answer. And I think
yeah.
that's, part of the
The,
frustration as well.
the the other thing I wanted to ask you, because I'm sure that some people listening to the podcast may be dealing with this now, or almost certainly will be in the future, but navigating the doctor patient dynamic as a third party advocate for your brother.
Mhm.
Because I saw my mom do this for her mom when she was in a nursing home slash hospital setting where she's doing similar things, asking doctors to explain things 5 times
Yep.
because it's just what they're saying is not clear or they're not giving full explanations. And this is just a broad generalization because some doctors will obviously be better at that. Other doctors will infantilize the family of the patients
Right.
where they're almost like, patting you on the head, like,
Mhm.
calm down, like, we're the big boys, we'll do our work. And like, if your brother survives or dies, we'll let you know. But like, other than that, it's just like, stay the fuck out of our way.
They have these
Stop, you're
godlike
slowing us
complex.
down mentality. Like, they're like, everything you say to me is slowing me down right now. So just shut the fuck up.
Yep.
And that is a reality of the medical system. Like, I've seen that with my mom. I know that's something that goes on, and I've heard other people's experiences similar to yours, where you have to really like you have to be beyond proactive. Like you almost have to be a demon for your loved ones, like an unrelenting demon in in their room to figure out what's going on. What are the things that that you would say helped you be a better advocate for your brother? What are the things that worked? What things didn't work? Kind of like give me some insight into how you went about that process
Yeah.
dealing with the doctors.
Yeah. And
Because your brother easily could have went the other way if you weren't as good of an advocate.
right, right. Yeah. And a lot of it was just trial and error, learning what worked and what didn't work. Um, I know the nurses were, you can really tell, you could just tell the quality of care by certain nurses, just how they engage with you and how, if, for example, if he had, he had a wound in his neck, right? If a nurse, some nurses would be like, "Oh, let's clean that up. Let's make that look nice." And then I'd come in some days and his neck looks like he just got stabbed in it, and I'd
Mm,
be like, "Well, why aren't you cleaning that?" "Well, we try not to do that, too much." And I'm like, "Well, the other nurse did it all the time." So you kind of can figure out like certain care, like what's acceptable, what they will do, what they won't do based on nurses, because you're never getting the same nurse over and over again. It's constantly, on this the scheduling, and it's like a revolving door. Um, with the nurses, like it's pretty simple. They're checking his vitals, they're cleaning him up. So you can like catch pretty quickly, you can see what's acceptable, what's not. If his lips are dry. He's probably dehydrated. So it's like, well, can he get some ice or
mm,
something like that? Or obviously he couldn't swallow. So you don't want to give him ice cubes. He could, possibly choke on it.
mm-hmm,
But, you can kind of figure out what the process is. The doctors, and you said it perfectly. Like they have this godlike complex. They come in like fucking Oz. And it's like, here I am, like I'm life or death. And they
mm-hmm,
have these complexes. Um, the best thing I can do, what I did is I took notes. If I had a conversation with him one day, he said he would do this. You know, you can be assertive, but you don't necessarily, you don't want to be a dick. You
mm-hmm,
know, just like, hey doctor, we talked the other day. You said that on this day you're going to perform the tracheotomy. Is that going to happen right now? I know you said that. It comes based on need. I'm like, he's 45 years old. He's a super healthy guy. Like he would more than likely be, the person on top of your list. So it's like a way of making sure you're taking notes so you don't come across, because they'll they'll make a deduction on you in the first 5 minutes of a conversation. If you are a little more inquisitive, if you're a little more intelligent, if you care more, if you ask questions. um, the main thing I would recommend is take notes. Make sure you are assertive, but you don't want to be passive. You want to be assertive, but you also don't want to be an asshole.
mm-hmm.
Um, you don't want to alienate the staff because, at some point you have to go home. You're not going to be there overnight. And, last thing you want to do is leave your loved one in the care of somebody that's like, well, that fucking brother's an asshole. I'm going to fucking, I don't care. I'm not going to go check on him all the time.
Yeah.
So it's, you know, there's not like a
You
set.
don't want to activate the God complex.
Right, right. But then also understanding, like
Yeah.
there's a case manager, there's a head nurse that you can report any issues for. So like one of the instances I came in and one of the nurses there, and I could tell she just wasn't engaging, you know, she didn't have that warmth. And I understand, like you see 100 patients a day, like I know he's not family, so that's fine as long as you do your job. But the doctor had came in and they looked at him and they said, like, you know, his neck, like, why isn't it cleaned out? Why is it dirty? And the nurse was like, oh, I cleaned it a couple hours ago. And I was like, I was here all fucking day. I'm like, she didn't clean it. So I go, well, excuse me. I was here all day long. You did not fucking clean his neck. And she's like, and she just froze because she
Yeah.
knew it. She like got fucking caught in a lie.
Yeah.
And at that point, I'm like, all right, I got her there. So I went and I reported it to the head nurse there because there's a nurse that oversees it. It's like the managing nurse.
Yeah.
And I put in a formal complaint. So like if they know that you understand the system and how things work too, they're gonna be like, okay, we gotta have to be, you know, a little bit more attentive here, you know. Some people are just gonna say, "Oh, I trust you, do whatever," you know, and they're gonna know which patients they have to be a little more hands-on with
Yeah.
and you know, ones they can get away with. So,
So setting an assertive boundary early on to kind of keep the doctor on watch of like, okay, if I don't do a good job of explaining something, or I sort of put stuff on the back burner for this patient,
mhm.
their brother or their daughter, son's gonna hound me a little bit more, be a little bit more of a bulldog
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. But I also think like,
without being an asshole.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, a lot of people conflate being assertive with being a dick, and that's not the case. Um, and I do think that, you know, it's a fine line and you kind of have to like figure out what works and what doesn't. Um, and it's unfortunate because like, you know, so many people pass away because they don't have a loved one there that's there every day. Like
Yeah.
I would go there with my laptop and I'd be working, you know,
Yeah.
but like your heart breaks for people that don't have that support, you know, somebody to be there.
Yeah, and thank God it was 2022 and not 2020 or early
Right.
2021 when people were not even allowed to visit their loved ones in the hospital.
Yeah.
Literally having to hold up signs outside the window.
No chance. There's no chance.
Yeah.
And it's heartbreaking stuff to think about.
Yeah. So going off of spending all that time in the hospital, your daughter was born 18 months ago. She's about a year and a half now,
Yeah.
you said. And she was born at 27 weeks,
Mhm.
which is 3 months early.
Yeah.
And you said that that had a very real impact on your perception.
Yeah. It was it it, it was oh, man, I can't even describe it. Just the element of becoming a father coupled by so it's almost like the best simile to describe what it was like to become a father and having to deal with she spent 86 days in the NICU. So that's every day. I mean, I tried to go as every day. My wife was there every fucking day,
Yeah.
86 days. It's like being thrown into the deep end with a piano on your back, and it's just like, figure it out. Like, so that year, 2023, was probably the craziest year of my life. Um, and I'm sure, you know, like I'm only 37 now. I'm sure there's a lot more shit in store down the road, but like you can't even write this shit. So at the time I was this senior writer for Bed Bath and Beyond
Yeah.
Corporate. And my daughter, so April 2023, my daughter is going to be is supposed to be born in August, right?
Yeah.
Now, a month before she's actually born, I get notice that Bed Bath& and Beyond is going complete liquidation, is going out of business. So I don't like that's my main source of income, right?
Mm,
So my daughter, like my firstborn daughter is due.
yeah. And this is before she's born. You get this
So this is
notification.
April.
April.
Then the next month, a month later, she's born prematurely.
Okay.
And
So Bed Bath & Beyond, liquidation, complete collapse. We can get into that after
yeah,
this. But then a month later, no losing income, bam, your daughter's born 3
just
months early.
like you talk about just challenging moments. Um, and you want to talk about like ideologies and just weird coincidences. So, and it actually ties into the book too, which is really, not to sound, like this is all serendipitous, but I think I'm at a point now in my life where I try to look for connections, even if obviously they're not, true. It just kind of gives you that sort of nod, like maybe this is,
Yeah.
should make sense. Um, so May 27th, my daughter is born. My wife is so her water breaks a couple days beforehand. So she's going to live in a hospital, hopefully until August,
Mhm.
to keep the baby in as
Yeah.
long as she can. So that's the plan, right? So I'm like, holy shit, my wife is gonna spend fucking 3 months in a hospital bed. Um, but 3 days later, I'm visiting her in the hospital, and
Wait, so your wife was gonna spend 3 months in a hospital bed with the baby inside her?
yeah, so her water breaks.
Okay.
It's May 23rd, May 24th. Her water breaks at school. She's a teacher. She goes to the hospital. She's like, "Oh, I'm just gonna go checked out. I feel weird." So I met her there. They do a test, and it's like your water broke, so you can't go anywhere. You're at on the verge of delivering right now at any moment.
Jeez. I didn't know they did. I thought they would just deliver the baby early
No,
and then it's in the
it's too.
NICU and you try to keep the baby alive. I didn't know that an option was that they go, "All right, we're gonna keep you pregnant for 3 months in a hospital bed."
Well, ideally, it's like we want to keep you pregnant for as long as
As
possible.
long as possible, okay.
So the NICU's there obviously to help, grow the baby, but it's not a substitute if they can keep her in the womb longer.
Yeah, it's better to be in the womb. Okay. I had no idea. I just assumed that it was just like, "All right, let's get the baby out and put it in the NICU." But there are moms out there that
It's
they're just, like, sitting in bed pregnant in the hospital for weeks or months.
and because she was only 27 weeks, it's a little too early, so they wanted to keep her in for as long as possible. So she was in the hospital for 3 days. I show up on it was a Saturday, and within the span of 2 hours from her, we're just sitting there watching TVs. She's delivering, and it all happened like so frantically. Like they rush her down. They're like, here's a gown, put everything on. We'll meet you in the ER. And they're like, she's gonna deliver. And I'm like, well, is that bad? Is that good? Like, you don't know what to believe. Like, I never had a kid before, like obviously 27 weeks sounds pretty fucking bad.
Yeah.
And I remember being in the ER room and just like freaking out. Like, what's gonna happen? Like, is my daughter gonna be alive? Is she gonna have issues? Like, you're going through all these possibilities and like, just spiraling, and I'm just waiting and waiting. And I get a ping on my phone, and it's a voicemail. And this is crazy shit. It's a voicemail from a Jehovah's Witness who 6 months prior, I was stoned one night and I answered the call and I had a conversation with this fucking dude. His name is James,
Yeah.
who turns out to be the character in the book that's reading Krishnamurti. And
Does this guy know that he's a character in the book?
no,
Okay.
he has no idea. And he's this dude on the phone, and he's just like, "Hey, I just want to talk to you about, Jesus." And I'm like, I was stoned one night. I'm like, I went to Catholic school. Fuck, I'll talk about Jesus. Let's fucking fire it up.
Yeah.
We had an hour-long conversation about, scripture, and, I gave him my, qualms with it and hesitations and things I liked about it. And we shot the shit for an hour, like a conversation you don't have unless you're fucking high.
Yeah.
So, and that was the conversation I had with James. 6 months later, that day, I had missed this call earlier, and he left me a voicemail. And I listened to it. I'm in the emergency room, and it's like, Hey, Chris, this is James. I know we haven't talked in a while, but I just wanted to leave you a scripture, something to kind of encourage you. We haven't talked in 6 months, and he starts reading a scripture. It's Isaiah 41:10. And as he's reading it, and I don't know the whole passage, but it's like, he starts reading it, and it's like, fear not, for I am your God. I am here for you. I will help you in these moments of distress. And, like, I'm hearing this, and it's just, like, fucking goosebumps, man. Like, are you kidding me? You
Yeah.
know? Like, of all times, I'm on, like, the scariest moment of my life. I'm so panicked, I'm worried, and here's this guy reading a passage that's comforting. It's you can't pick a better passage at that
Yeah.
moment where it's like, "Fear not, I am with you. I'm here to help you. I am
Yeah.
your God." And I'm like,
That's crazy that it happened right at that moment. That's like
right at that fucking
if you were, if you were jerking off 6 months later and he calls you, leaves a
oh, yeah,
voicemail, and he
fucking
says, "Just so you know, God is watching you." And you're like, "Fuck, how did he
yeah.
is he James watching me too? What the hell is going on?" Jehovah's Witnesses, got some good audio visual blackmail going on in my house. They have the fucking lowdown on what I'm doing. But that's insane that you got that message right at that moment.
And it was like a long list of these non-secular signs that I kept getting in the hospital where I'm like, gee, I'm like, holy shit, man. Maybe there really is a fucking God.
What were
Or
some of those signs?
like, so, thus began my journey of the NICU of Carly. And you're gonna meet her later. She was born, she was 2 pounds, man, 2 fucking pounds. And I'm just sitting
That's the
there.
probably the weight of this microphone right
Yeah.
here.
And now she's 21 pounds. She's fucking crawling up a couch and she's stealing food out of my hand. But it's just like the complete dichotomy of this time where I'm just like in this on the edge of just like not knowing what to do, like, leaving the care of my daughter and my hopes into like, just the universe and hoping for the best. And it was maybe a month later. I'm in I'm getting used to the NICU and the processes, and I'm learning how to change a diaper every day because a nurse is teaching me how to do it, and I learned how to do a swaddle because a nurse is showing me how to do it. And you're in the NICU and you share a room, and one of the shittiest part about it is like Carly was in there for 86 days, and through 86 days she had 4 or 5 roommates, and these are people that come in, they spend a week or 2, and then they go out.
Mm.
And you start making
This is a
these.
roommate in the NICU, so
Yeah,
it's another baby,
another
another
baby.
premature baby.
Yeah,
Okay.
but every single time it's like a baby that's 34 weeks or 35 weeks. And you kind of start out and you're just like, and you see these people and they're stressed, and it's like part of you is like, man, fuck you. Like, you're gonna be in here for 10 days, 14 days. We've been in here for months.
Yeah.
And that part takes over where you're just like really, you're really envious.
Mm.
And that's natural. You're going through a troubling moment and you're trying to get through it, and you're jealous of people that are more fortunate than you. But that I didn't let that affect me because I was becoming very much aware of just like my energy when I'm in there, and I'm just trying all these different things to just cope and get through it. And I'm going day by day. Like, that's the only way to get through this. But there was a father that came in, and he looked like a deer in the headlights. And I just observed him, and he's just like, he's not sure, like, what to do. The baby's crying, and he's concerned because he's like, well, they're in the NICU. Like, I don't want to hurt the baby. And I could just see he was struggling. And so finally, nobody's in there. It's just me, and I'm working, or I'm, trying to do, resume, and I'm sending out resumes and
Yeah.
shit. And I'm like, fuck, man, I'm unemployed right now.
Yeah.
Like, the full scale of it is just like, you're fucked right now,
Yeah.
but I'm trying to get through it, man. And I can just see him. He finally picks up the baby, and he's like rocking, and I can see he's like concerned. And something just overcame me where I'm just like, I looked up and we made eye contact, and I'm like, "You're doing good, Dad." Like, like just a little burst of encouragement, and I can just see like it really resonated with him. He nodded, and that was it. He didn't say anything, and I wasn't expecting to have some long, heartfelt dialogue, but I felt like I had to give him some sort of encouragement.
Yeah.
And I didn't go back the next day, but a couple days later, I came back, and, I was with my daughter, and the nurse stopped by, and she's like, "Hey," she's like, the dad there, he left you something because he got discharged." And I'm like, good for him. I wasn't feeling like that cynical, like fuck them. Like I was grateful. Like I'm happy that they were
Yeah.
able to leave here. You don't want to spend this much time in here. And she comes over, and it's this gift, and it's rosary beads. And the dad leaves me a note, and it's just like, I can't tell you how much that what you said to me meant to me. Um, I hope that you make it out soon. Here's what kept me sane through those 14 days I was there. And he's like, I hope this helps. And it was like these rosary beads. And it's like, damn, man, there's just like another sort of God tie-in,
Yeah.
it's just like in your face all the time. Um, and it's just, that was another aspect of it. Um,
Can you touch your baby in the NICU? Because you said that
yeah,
dad was holding the
yeah.
baby. Can you use your hands, or you have to be gloved and, like
Oh yeah.
scrubbed up the entire time, or what is it like?
So it does depend on like how far along they are. So like Carly started out, she did like she was in a almost like an incubator, like whole protective glass.
Like
And
the thing where you're putting your gloves
yeah,
into the glass?
yep. So you go in every day, you have to scrub up, you sanitize, you wipe down everything. You can't have your phone out there because these things are just capture so much
Yeah.
bacteria. Um, and yeah, like the first couple of weeks, you can hold her, but she's like hooked up to so many fucking wires, man. Um, and that's another thing too. Like you fucking see like this little baby, and it's just like, man, like you can't help but just be like, it just breaks your heart. You see this little baby, this helpless being, and it's just connected to five fucking wires. They have a tube on the nose and just wires connected to them, and it's just like, oh man, it just it just really does something to you. It's indescribable, and as a writer, like, I still try to, figure out, like, how to come to terms with it. And obviously now, like, she's super healthy and rambunctious, and, but at the time, it's like, you don't know any better, and so you're kinda desensitized to it. But at the same time, like, it's your baby, your child, and it's just, so you can hold the baby for a little bit. They encourage the skin to skin contact. It releases oxytocin, and it helps the bonding. Um, and then eventually the baby goes into a bed, and it starts losing wires here and there. The CPAP is usually the last thing to learn to lose, and that's what helps it breathe because the lungs are underdeveloped.
Mm,
Um, but until the baby is it's only until a couple weeks, a week or 2, that the baby doesn't have any wires on it.
yeah.
Um, but it was a challenging thing. But, trying to change a diaper with 5 fucking wires in your way, like,
Yeah.
you become pretty skilled at it.
I mean, it's one thing to see a grown man on life support and have a bunch of wires in him, but to see a 2-pound baby with wires sticking out of it and ventilation and tubes and all that shit, like, I can't imagine how much that pulls on your heart when you're looking at a baby in that state.
And it's every day you go there. And it's really tough, but, you just see little progress every day, and it really helps. It encourages you. Um, and then just the bigger picture, man. And it's something I think about every time when I see her. And we could talk into like how different I am as a person becoming a father now.
Yeah.
But like my daughter came into this world, like just with the odds already stacked against her, and just like such a shitty way to fucking come into the world, you know? And now you see her and and it's like, it's kind of maybe the writer in me to kind of look deeper into this, but like it's not how you start, it's how you finish. Like you see her now and none of that shit is affecting her, you know? Like it's not, it doesn't change her personality. Like she's so loving, she's so friendly, she's so like she loves the littlest things in life and just like right now it's Christmas. Like she has a fucking penchant for snowmen. Every time she sees a snowman, she's just like, man,
Yeah.
and it's just like it just brings you like this little joy and it goes back to like the philosophy of just like
And you have to tell her, "Hey, you don't know how this snow person identifies.
yeah,
Don't just assume
yeah.
the
You don't
gender of this snow person."
I know you can't see its genitalia, and I know genitalia doesn't define gender, but
Yeah, and you had to give her that whole lecture
yeah,
out in the snow.
yeah, it was really important stuff,
Instead of making snowballs, you were
yeah,
telling her that balls don't define gender.
right, right.
It's very
So
important.
yeah, and I wasn't, and honestly, I'm not gonna decide what gender she is. I'm gonna let the kindergarten teacher decide.
Yeah.
So
That's why I'm surprised you were using feminine pronouns for her because you told me you were gonna have a gender reveal party at 13
mhm,
when she
when she decides.
yeah.
Yep. Yep.
So, but on a serious note, I am of course I'm extremely uh glad and just happy for you how everything worked out with not only your daughter but with your brother too in those situations because like you were saying before, things could have easily went sideways if you make one decision here or the dice roll out this way there. It's a lot of it is out of your control, but
Yeah.
you can only control what you can.
But and I think like just you saying it there, like we're so obsessed with trying to control everything, and it's everything we do. Like we want to be in control of our lives as best we can, but at some point we have to acquiesce to the point where we can't control the uncontrollable, and we have to be okay with that,
Yeah.
you know? And a lot of that is what got me through it is just like trying to let go and just like I don't know, just believing in something greater than
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah. Well, so part of not having control leading into the story of your daughter, you mentioned that the month before not Barnes and Noble, Bed Bath and Beyond
Yeah.
collapses,
Yeah.
and that's a part of the added stress. Obviously, your daughter's life is much more valuable than a job, but it doesn't help that your company just goes ass up a month before your daughter's born. You're stuck there without any income. And we were talking about the Bed Bath and Beyond situation before the podcast, and you were mentioning the CEO. I had no idea about any of this, and you told me that this is going to be a Netflix documentary one day.
Easily, easily.
What the hell happened with Bed Bath and Beyond?
So in the demise of Bed Bath and Beyond actually began when I was with my brother in the hospital. I was getting like wisps of like reportings that earnings are down significantly, sales are cut in half. So like it just started there, and it wasn't until like a month came. So just to rewind how Bed Bath and Beyond, and it's gonna be a Netflix documentary because there was so much gross incompetence and issues with management that in the span of 4 years, you're talking one of the most prominent brands operating close to 2,000 stores globally,
Hmm.
trading on the stock exchange, been in business for 50 years, right? Goes from having almost $1 billion in cash to nothing, to just
Jesus.
complete liquidation. And it all started with the CEO, Mark Triton, taking over Bed Bath in 2019. And granted, it was on the cusp of when the pandemic hit,
Hmm.
but there was a lot of fucking silly shit this guy did, right? So he comes in and he came from Target, so he has this playbook. He's like, I'm just gonna cut and paste and do it on Bed Bath and Beyond. But granted, Target sells groceries, has a whole different diverse line of offerings than just like home decor items.
Yeah.
Sold clothing and stuff. But his plan was like, I'm just going to cut and paste and do it on Bed Bath and Beyond. So this guy comes in March of, the pandemic hits. So everybody's working remotely, right? This guy comes into the corporate building and he's just like, you know what? This place needs to be a lot classier. And he just decides to completely redesign, restyle the whole corporate building.
Mm.
And this whole corporate building it's fucking it housed 1,200 employees. You're talking multi levels, right? He comes in, he's like, let's get $1,500 chandeliers everywhere. Like the fucking craziest shit. This guy comes in during the pandemic, nobody's there, and he just outfits the whole place. He paints all the walls, he puts in lavish furniture everywhere.
And everyone's remote. Like no one's fucking
Nobody's
coming
in the
into this
fucking
building.
Yeah, yeah. And he just comes in, he's like, "No, you know what? Trust." And he's very charming. He has this like Australian accent.
Have you ever met him in person?
I never did. No, no. Um, but he's like he's very eccentric. He wears like bold colors and he's very charming and he just charmed the pants off of everybody on the board and just got all this spending passed and he just starts spending money like he's fucking, like he's got unlimited money to spend and it just
Yeah.
started with redesign like the cafeteria turned into like a 5-star restaurant.
Yeah.
It's like, what is going on here, man?
With no clientele,
It's
with no customers. No one's
It's like
everyone's
nobody's in
fucking
the
at home.
office. So that started there, right? And then, so you're talking 2.5 years, 3 years go by, and then, granted, the company starts like buying back their stock to drive the they start spending money on their own stock to drive up the price of their stock, right? Because they think they're on the verge of like just super scaling, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't know based off of what data, but they just start spending all their cash, right? So you're talking like $1 billion is just dwindling,
Yeah.
dwindling, dwindling. And then June comes around and the CEO, the earnings come out, and the CEO has spent more than double in one quarter um, than the company has ever spent before. I think the most they ever spent in one quarter was 175 million. He spent 325 million.
Jesus.
And so finally the board
300 on the building, the chandeliers, 300 mil.
so I mean it's not all on that,
Yeah.
but just spending money like crazy, man. And one of the things is he wanted to make his own products in-house, but you're talking during a pandemic and you're trying to cut corners. So all the products he put out were shit quality. I had 3 coat racks like downstairs in my basement right now. They all broke within 6 months because they're shit,
Yeah.
you know. So June comes around and the board is like, oh fuck, we gotta like get this guy out of here, right? So they push him out, right? He gets like $12 million and he just fucking goes on his way.
Yeah. Just like the total corporate severance where they just stuff your pockets for being a failure.
Dude, fucking $12 million.
Yeah.
I'm like, just give me 600K and I'll do the same shit this guy did.
Yeah.
So June happens, right? Now the he's out. So now we have an interim board. Sue, I don't even know her name. At this point, she's so irrelevant. But granted, she was given a sinking ship. Then August comes around. The CFO is named in a lawsuit for insider trading. And so he goes home that night in the city and he jumps off a fucking skyscraper. He kills himself.
Jesus.
Yeah.
The same day he was named
Yeah.
in the insider trading lawsuit, he doesn't even want to put up a fight. I guess there's just so much shit that he's like, fuck this.
Now, this guy, 3 days prior, I was in a meeting with him.
Yeah.
And he's on camera.
Zoom.
And he's just like, listen, despite what you hear, everything's fine. It's just like, there's no money issue. We're going to get through this. And fucking 3 days later.
You open the New York Post and it's just your fucking CFO's brain splattered on the sidewalk.
And there's a picture of him on the front page of Yahoo News. I'm like, I just had a fucking meeting with that guy. And it's like CFO jumps to death I'm like, what the fuck, man? So
I feel like, how did I not hear about this? They must have done a good job. Did they hire you as the marketing guy to be like, cover this shit up, put out, drive traction
it
to
was
our chandeliers instead?
I think it had a good life cycle in the news, but then the bigger story became Bed Bath & Beyond is about to crash, and that's June. I think we got another $500 million loan, and then I think by April, 7-8 months later, the intellectual property was sold for like $21 million.
Hmm.
It's a fucking joke.
Yeah.
We
What
got
intellectual property? How to build a desk or
just
how to
no
make
the
soap?
name Bed Bath & Beyond.
Oh, Bed
So
Bath & Beyond. Okay.
Overstock bought the name and just was like, you know what? Our name sucks. Overstock is not really, the best brand. So let's just take Bed Bath & Beyond's name and let's just go by Bed Bath & Beyond now. And that's what they did.
Really?
Yeah, that's what they did now. And, I don't think they're doing well because you go to the Bed Bath & Beyond website, it sucks. It's all AI written descriptions. So you don't even know what anything is. It's a nightmare to shop on there. But you're talking, we got a $500 million loan in the beginning of September. And in April, they sold pretty much the company for $20 million.
Yeah.
It's, and you're
Bed
talking
Bath & Beyond getting sold for $20 million is
yeah,
insane.
intellectual property. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's, and I had to go back to, give him my laptop, and I'm in the corporate building, and they're having auctions on all the shit that he decorated the place with. You're talking like $1,000 farm tables, like
Yeah.
everywhere. It's like, what
Did
the
you try to
fuck?
grab some shit? Because everything in that building is probably pretty
Yeah.
high price because the CEO's like, we need $500 pens.
Dude, they were selling the letters for $500 a piece on top of the corporate building. You could buy a B for $400, a big B.
Were people, so you went to turn your laptop back
Yeah.
in. What would they do if you didn't? Like
I don't know,
they're in
man.
shit, like they're collapsed. What
Well,
are they gonna do?
well, I got
Pay a
a
lawyer with no money?
Well, I got a severance. I was due a severance, so I'm like,
Okay.
I'm not
So you don't
gonna
want to fuck that
fuck
up.
it up
Yeah.
by a $50 laptop.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, no, it is. I mean, to think that Bed Bath & Beyond, like that downfall is insane.
Did anyone buy the chandeliers? Did you see
I have
someone putting in a
no
bid?
idea, man. But I didn't have a job at that point. I'm like, that's a nice looking farm table, but I don't have $500 to buy. So
Yeah.
it's like, but yeah, man, what a crazy, crazy, just fucking year.
Yeah.
dude.
It would have been more metaphorical if the CEO hung himself by the chandelier instead of jumped off the roof.
I mean, at
Or
least he would've
CFO,
got,
you said.
at least he would have got the money worth. I mean,
Yeah, it would have been more useful.
yeah, I mean, and a little more tasteful. I think it would have
He
been
could
a
have
little more
used the Bed
poetic.
Bath & Beyond chair, the chandelier, and then you kick out the chair, and boom, you're hung by your own doing.
Oh man, yeah.
Yeah.
What a fucking year.
Yeah. Well, that's definitely a dark turn of events for Bed Bath & Beyond. And as a writer, you definitely don't shy away from dark turns of events. And I think this would be a great spot to read an excerpt from Crazy by Conscious.
Good.
Because you were kind enough to send me the first chapter. The book, again, is out now everywhere. Amazon, Kindle, you said too, bookstores. But when I was going through the first chapter, I picked out a few excerpts. It was hard to pick out just one to read because I feel like so much of that chapter is just packed with the stylings that I'm used to seeing from you, from the short stories, Finn buys a goldfish, other things I've seen, but I'm settled on this excerpt because not only is it a fantastic piece of your writing, but it involves Fast and the Furious franchise.
Okay.
And I love how you I love how you brought that into it. So I'm going to read this excerpt from chapter 1 of Crazy by Conscious. Dennis hates how many years he spent in school, actually paying attention. He detests how many hours he spent devoted to reading, writing, and trying to perfect his writing prowess. He gets nauseous when he thinks about all the fatuous minutes dedicated to remembering newly learned vocabulary words, packing his mind with meaningless clusters of consonants. He loathes all the empowering TED Talks packed with positive reinforcement he ingested in pursuit of nourishment for his blighted ego, the soliloquies about manifesting something positive. And he's convinced there's no such thing as karma. He knows he's just been conditioned to believe things happen for a reason, that people get what they want put into the world, but he finally grasps the sentiment how it's a purely placating platitude, quasi-fatalist nonsense recited by vacuous individuals to ease the sting of disappointment. The type of people that like their own posts on social media for self-validation. Dennis likens life more to the Fast and Furious movies, a series that first brought exhilaration and enjoyment, a promising story that hooked with entertainment, memorable characters, a sequel to look forward to, until they just kept fucking coming. One after the other, evolving with new subtitles and identical personalities with just different names, each rendition worse than the previous, declining plots with tired, recycled storylines. And after 10 installments, you finally had enough. Vin Diesel is a soundboard of fraternity cliches, Paul Walker's still dead, and you just want it to fucking stop. You've seen enough. It's insipid, fucking mind-numbing, enough to make you go Oedipus Rex style on yourself. The gouging of eyes, not the having sex with your own mother part. Wow.
Yeah.
I love that excerpt. I'm just picturing Vin Diesel reading your book,
Yeah.
just being like,
What the fuck? What did I do to this guy?
family. It's all about family.
Yeah. I liked and a lot of the novel. So like there's a lot of satirical elements. So just you understand context of this first chapter. Like you're met with the protagonist Dennis,
Yeah.
who has, you know, granted in the context of what we're talking about, has these ambitions that he's failed to achieve. So he's in a very desolate state. He's suicidal, and you know, we see him at his lowest point here, and that's kind of the beginning part. There's not a lot of build up. I don't want to like, you know, kind of give you the backstory and see where we're at. Like I want to just throw you into this moment in his life and then kind of build upon it.
Yeah.
But one of the things I like to do throughout this book is I like to tie into like classic literature aspects. So obviously Oedipus Rex, you know, the story of Oedipus where you know, and it's a psychological terms, the Oedipus complex where you develop this infatuation with your mother.
Yeah.
But in the story of Oedipus Rex, it's so much so where he becomes jealous of his father, you know, and he kills his father to be with his mother. Um, but once he realizes that it's his mother, and you know, he comes to you know, accept what he did. You know, he can't fathom living, you know, in his current state, so he gouges his eyes out. So
Yeah.
I try to find ways to tie classic literature pieces into, you know, the present setting. So it was fun to like find a way to link you know, the Fast and Furious with an Oedipus Rex you know, mention.
Yeah. And it did make me think about the the algorithmic world of just spitting out Marvel sequels or spitting out Fast and Furious sequels, and like the fact that we live in an algorithmic world that solves for cravings but not creativity.
Yeah.
It's like we're just bombarded with brain sugar.
Mm.
And it works because like who doesn't love eating a fucking donut? And like the brain version of that is just like inhaling Fast and the Furious 9. And I've seen probably 7 of them, and the first 2 are my favorite by far.
Right.
But there is like this TikTokable aspect of the later ones where you're like, this isn't a great movie, but the entertainment value of watching The Rock jump over a 6-lane highway and land on on the hood of a convertible unscathed,
Right.
like he just leaped across a sofa. It's like, I'm gonna leap across 6 lanes of traffic,
Yeah.
and that's just like a side part of the plot. Like that's just one of the 1,000 things that happen, or like launching a car into space, like it's a fucking SpaceX rocket. Just like these wild things where I'm like, all right, like this isn't going to be a good, well-written film that leaves me pondering my existence and thinking more about my life and the world that I live in, it's gonna be not that like good films have to like tell you how to live, because I don't think that either. Like sometimes I watch a Tarantino film and I'm like, that was really fucking good, and people's brains get blown out at the end, and it was what it was, and there's deeper meanings to it. Not that everything always has to like deliver that deeper meaning constantly throughout the movie, but like that's just non-existent with Fast and the Furious 9.
Right.
So I don't know how I feel about it, where I'm like, on the one hand, it's not good, but on the other hand, it is like inhaling a donut with my eyes. It's like that version of that, and I do like donuts occasionally. But if that's all that's being produced, especially nowadays where all studios want is a definite return on a movie,
Mhm.
like where does that leave us? There's no like steak and potatoes anymore. It's just like these fucking. You still have great movies being made, but it seems like we're at a point where everything is becoming marvelized.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I listen. The Fast and the Furious definitely is a specific type of audience, and
And I'm gonna send this episode to Vin Diesel, by
yeah,
the way. He's gonna preview it before it comes out.
yeah, it'll be like, fuck this dude. Um,
I think he'd respect it.
you think so?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
an
He's
enlightened Diesel.
he's gonna be like,
I think he'd invite you to be on set for Fast and Furious 13 or whatever one they're on.
he might challenge me to a dance off. Have you ever seen his?
No.
Did you know he
No.
started as a like a break dancer?
No.
Oh my god, on YouTube,
I've got to check this out.
there's a whole video of him. He's like maybe 20 years old, and he does like a it's like a whole video on he does some performance, and he's like break dancing and shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have seen there's an interview with him where some girl's interviewing him about maybe one of the Fast and Furiouses,
Okay.
maybe Chronicles of Riddick, I forget. But he's on some drug, and I'm gonna guess Molly,
Okay.
because every time the woman speaks and tries to ask him, Vin Diesel, a genuine question, she'll say, what was the thinking behind the character process for this movie? And he just leans in and goes, "Come on, baby, let's cut the shit.
Are you
You're
serious?
so beautiful. He keeps saying, he's like, you're so beautiful. You're so look, and he like looks at the other people, like the cameraman. He's like, come on, like, is this a joke? Look at this girl right here. And she's just like 15 minutes of him just like gushing over this girl. But no, I need to check out the dance one.
Oh, it's so painful to it's like
He's an artist of his time.
it's very cringe-worthy, but yeah, you only aspire to get to that point in your life where you could just think that everybody wants you, just based on your success, and, you know, uh, e essentially, if you kinda have to feel bad for him. I mean, obviously, he's super successful, but to
Yeah.
get to a point where you're just, like, so enthralled with yourself where it's just like, "Well, I'm Vin Diesel. I could just say what I want, and you're gonna, be powerless with my against my charm," Like, it's just man, what a fucking shitty existence that
Yeah.
have that lack of self-awareness.
Yeah. Do you I think like he must be aware at some and it's not just Vin Diesel. I'm just picking on him because of the Fast and Furious example, but he must be aware at some point that this is just a formulaic studio form of commerce. It's not art at that point. It's literally it's a product being sold to try to make the maximum profit to China essentially, and America, and but like a lot of these studios, they're just like, well, we can't like piss off certain countries because it's so much of our viewership, so we have to like package these things to make as much money as possible. I wonder, he must be aware of it to some point, but I wonder if he'll have a more interesting arc where he sort of steps back from the blockbuster guaranteed style films and goes into a more interesting role, because I have seen him do other shit
Oh,
where I'm like,
yeah,
oh yeah,
dude.
like this is pretty fucking good.
He had a couple of, good roles. I liked him a lot in A Man Apart. That was a deeper, darker role. But I think, like, these Fast and the Furious fucking, installments, they're just, like, based on a formula. It's like, well, we need some and it's, you know, in terms of metaphorically speaking, it's just kind of a commentary on society. It's like, well, people want like that instant shock and that exhilaration. So let's show a bunch of crazy shit and like cars exploding and jumping out of planes and stuff, and that's great. And it's like you lose the art form of like real storytelling
Yeah.
and like deeper sort of sentiments. And obviously that shit's not for everybody, but like after a while, it's like you can't just keep doing the same shit over and over again. And
Yeah.
I mean, some people, they're just gonna watch it based on the title, but it's like in terms of quality content, like that shit expired a long time
Yeah.
ago.
And it is a two-way street. I feel guilty myself for being on the consumer end of it because I will and look, like everyone needs like there's ear candy in music, there's like brain sugar for movies, like everyone needs to enjoy like some shit once in a while just
Oh yeah.
because you're like, "Oh yeah, this is junk food for my brain." But like I literally had to stop myself in the gym the other day because I was just shuffling through songs and fast forwarding to the chorus. I was like, I just want to get to that fucking and I'm like, why can't I just do a set and listen to a fucking song or like 5 songs in a row or just pick an album and work out to the album? Why am I always looking for like that fucking hit of musical heroin? Why can't I just like let it hit me as it hits me?
Mhm.
You
You
know what
like
I
that
mean?
instant gratification.
Yeah, like I caught myself. I'm like, well, I've skipped through like 70 songs to find like the perfect 30 seconds to pump me up for this set of back. And I'm like, or I could just listen to fucking music while I work out or just like enjoy it on a drive or something like that. It doesn't always have to be like that hit and like it's music film. I feel like choruses have even moved up to be earlier in the song. Like a lot of songs now, like they start with the chorus just to like hook you
Or
in.
even songs, they only have 2 fucking verses on it, where
Yeah.
like 10 years, 15 years ago, there was 4
Yeah.
verses. It's just
But I
like,
feel like everything is just moved up to give you the dopamine earlier and hook you in, and the substance has suffered because of that. And I'm guilty because consume it and I try to be aware of it, but there are times where I'm like mindlessly watching shit. I'm like, why the fuck? Like, not just what I'm watching, but the way I'm watching it
right?
or listening to it.
Yeah, we're all fucking crackheads,
Yeah,
we're just looking for that jolt, that fix,
yeah,
and it's it's ubiquitous now more than ever. Um, just in terms of we have it, on our phones, like it's so accessible, and it's tough, man, to avoid it. You sit there, and it's like, and just to kind of tie it back to philosophy, a quote by Madame de Stael, a French woman philosopher. She's got this quote that says like, throughout life, one must choose between boredom and suffering. And it's like, I think the biggest thing nowadays is like, we're so afraid of being bored. And I catch myself all the time. Like if I'm
yeah,
out doing something, or like like I have some downtime, instead of just like, you know, I don't know, observing my surroundings or just watching people. It's like you could just pull out your phone in in a second, and
yeah,
you're inundated with stimulation.
yeah.
You know,
I I want to end off on this, and I purposely saved it to the end because people will feel one way or the other about this topic. But we're talking about phones, and before we started recording, we were texting back and forth about the UFO situation going on in New Jersey right now. We're literally recording in your house in the woods of New Jersey, where there's been the hot spot of UFO drone sightings going on. And if you've been living under a rock the last couple weeks, there have been hundreds, I'm sure thousands of videos at this point submitted by civilians, some by commercial pilots, military pilots. It's not just New Jersey. I think there are sightings out in LA, Ohio.
New
Like it's
York.
become New York, a widespread thing of anything from like orbs to drones the size of cars,
Yeah.
where I've heard people speak on this through podcasts and press conferences that are high level military people that are involved in military aviation that have seen like the biggest baddest shit that the United States has at least that we're like open about, which is like, F-16s, F-35s, like people that are familiar with these capabilities and have even flown these things, that there are people high up in military aviation saying these drones or these UAPs are doing maneuvers that currently defy what the United States military is able to do. They are coming from the ocean, a lot of them,
Yeah.
from miles and miles out, and we're not able to track them, which is insane because just like a hobbyist drone, there's a signal from the launcher of the drone. There's a signature that every drone has, that if someone's like, if it's some teenager in a yard is like launching a drone and it's near a military facility, there'll be a car outside your house in 20
Right.
minutes. Like,
Right.
we know you, like, we obviously track this back to you through the signature. There's no heat signature on a lot of these drones, which normally, with the sort of propulsion on a drone, like there, you could see some sort of like electronic heat signature. Apparently, that's not existent on a lot of these sightings. So there's a lot of shit. Drones that are like staying still in 120 knots of wind, like not even swaying. It's like the wind isn't even there, and they're just perfectly still. What the hell is going on
In New
in New
Jersey.
Jersey?
Yeah.
Because you've had actual sightings, like you've seen these
Oh,
outside your house.
yeah, yeah. So the whole thing is fucking crazy because I'm a natural skeptic. So, when I first heard, the rumors about the drones, I'm like, no fucking way. Like, this is bullshit. And then it all started when my wife was taking a nap on the couch and I came downstairs and she was like perked up, like, holy shit. I'm like, what's going on? She's like, there's fucking drones outside. I'm like, no fucking way. She's like, I will show you. So she like grabbed me, pulled me outside, and we're looking up. And I was like, holy fucking shit. We saw 3 drones, right? Probably, I'm going to say maybe 100 feet up.
How do you know they were 100 feet? Were you like
I
holding your hand up to kind of like
dude,
gauge
I
it,
have
or
no, again, I'm just a
just like,
writer.
okay, just a guess?
It could, fucking A, man. It could have been 1,000 feet.
Yeah.
All I'm saying, it was
It didn't look like a plane. It was like
no, no. It
much
was
lower than that.
discernible
Okay.
where, so
You could see features on it
the
and stuff.
one drone is going up and down like this, right? And moving all around. It's not a fucking plane. It's moving
Can you
erratic.
use words to describe what you're doing with your hands? Because people, no, seriously, just because people are listening,
Oh,
may
okay.
not know.
So it's popping up and down. It's undulating. There's a hot verb right there, and it's
Love it.
moving up and down. It's spinning around in circles. It's flying back and forth. It's moving erratic. It's not an aircraft. It's not a plane. Like, it's some strange shit moving around. Then there's 2 drones beside it, and they are like, the one is flying all the way down to the one end of the sky. Then it's flipping back, coming back the other way. And I'm sitting there and I'm like trying to convince myself this is not happening. But I'm like, you can't deny
What
this.
do you mean when you say to one end of the sky? Was it like going all the way to the
So
horizon?
it was in my vantage point, it's flying down towards the end of the block, and then it's turning around and flying back the other way, and then it's doing the same thing the other way, and then the one, adjacent to it is going around in circles and popping up and down, and it's just like this fucking circus in the sky, and I'm like, what the fuck is
Yeah.
going on?
Could you see any acceleration, or was it just
Yes.
go? You could,
Oh yeah,
okay,
man.
so it wasn't
It
just
is.
like like instantly appearing in a
No,
place.
no, no. It
Like
is.
you could see a clear
Yeah,
acceleration.
yeah, is flying back and forth, like, no joke, where I'm just like, "I can't believe what I'm actually seeing right now."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anything that would make you say that this does not seem like earthly drone technology, or could it be like a teenager fucking with you that's like flying a drone back and forth just as fast as it would go?
I honestly don't. I don't know, man. I don't know enough about drones,
Yeah.
to really say that. I know that there was another instance where I was pissing out. I have a gym on my property. I was taking a leak outside, and I heard like a buzzing sound, and I'm thinking to myself, oh, I must have turned the heat on, and then I look up, and there's a thing the size of a fucking like car just
Really?
idling, where I'm like, what the fuck is that? And I like try to run back in to grab my phone. I come back and I can see the thing is gone, but it's maybe 40 feet down into the woods,
Mm.
and it's just hovering up above, where I'm just like, I have a gun. Like, should I go shoot this thing?
Yeah.
And like, I actually texted my neighbor because he's a cop. I'm like, hey, dude, can I shoot these fucking drones or whatnot? He's like, no, man, don't shoot those things. It's gonna be a big fucking. You're gonna get in trouble. And he's
Did the cops say why? Because couldn't you technically shoot someone who's flying a drone over your property, or it's not someone, but shoot the drone that's in your
not in
property?
Jersey, man. So
Really?
what he said is like, if you shoot that thing, you don't know if it's gonna shoot back. He's like, we don't like, from what I can tell you, nobody really knows what this is. He's like, so you don't want to engage with that thing where it could shoot back at you. If you do shoot it, you don't know where it's going to crash into somebody's house. So like the protocol now is like to call and report it, but like, what the fuck is that going to do?
Yeah.
Like, hey, there's a drone over my property. They're not going to come out and fucking
Yeah.
bother.
So when you say the size of a car, are you talking an SUV? Are you talking, like what I'm driving a
Yeah,
Nissan
like a
Altima
sedan. Yeah,
sedan? Okay.
yeah.
And where was it in relation to you in the parking lot?
Well, so it was like hovering above, like, like just trees, where I'm like just in complete disbelief, where I'm like, is this like, for a split second, I'm like, is this some sort of joke? Is that like a pinata or something?
Yeah.
You don't think that there's an aircraft hovering
Yeah.
above.
Is it like 1,000 feet? Is it like 30 feet above you?
It's not 1,000 feet. It
Okay.
was much closer. It
Okay.
was much closer than the other ones that.
So like in the tree line. So it could be like
Yeah.
30
Yeah.
feet away, 50 feet away,
Yes.
something
Yes.
around that.
It was close enough where I'm like, I'm gonna get my phone, I'm gonna get footage of this, and by the time I came back, the thing was gone.
Close enough to make you feel like you could shoot it and like
Close enough to be
relatively
like,
accurately.
yeah, to like where I'm like, I think I need to shoot this. I don't know. Like the whole thing is so strange,
Yeah.
man. It really is, and it makes you wonder, like, if they're not being honest, it's got to be some sort of distraction, or like the fact that they can't give you information on this is so fucking strange.
Yeah.
Because, like you said, it was close to some base or some government building. Like they tell you in a fucking instant what this was.
Yeah. Was there anything that you saw, like, how sometimes you'll see something and you'll just clock it as like that's weird, like that, maybe I'm seeing something wrong because I don't know things in the world that are known to move like that. Like if I saw a car all of a sudden just like rise up from the street and then come back down, I'd be like, wait, what the fuck? Like I must have missed it, like go over a ramp or something or a speed bump. Was there anything that you saw the drone do where you're like, even if you don't know that much about drones, that you weren't, it just like struck you as strange?
Well, the thing that was strange is it was idling.
Mm,
It wasn't moving. So it's like, what is it doing right here? Like, is it trying to look at my land or my gym or something? But I mean, the thing is that I saw it. I'm like, what the fuck? And then I went to get my camera. So then I'm like, wait a minute, did it see me? Did it move? Because you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
so I don't know, man.
And it moved right when you went to go get your phone.
I mean, what it was idling, and I'm like, I need to go get footage of this. So I
Yeah.
ran back in. I had to be gone 8 seconds because the gym is right there. I grabbed my phone, came back, and the thing was all the way down there, idling again.
Yeah.
And it's dark and it's snowy out. I'm like, should I run back there? I'm like, nah, what am
Yeah.
I gonna do? So
Did it have lights on it?
this one did not, it had like a very subtle light on it.
Hmm.
It wasn't like the ones before that I saw in the sky that you could really see. Like I saw red, yellow, and then I saw a blue light on the one.
Okay.
Like the other ones had prominent lights. This one, not so much.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you were further away from your house, would.
I don't think you would have saw.
Okay, and this was like 6:30 at night. You were telling me
Yeah, like
the
6:30.
sun's pretty much down by then
Yeah.
in the winter.
Yeah.
So the second or this sighting outside your gym, it's almost like this drone was trying to go undiscovered, as opposed to the other
Yeah.
ones you've seen that have these flashing, green, blue light. I've seen lights of all different colors in the photos, but this one just had like a very subtle light that may have been like a camera light or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. But it was big. It was
The
huge.
size of a
It
car.
was really big.
Yeah.
I was like, what?
That would freak me the fuck out.
Yeah, man. I'm like, what is going on?
Yeah.
And dude, like, you know, you all your mind races with like, well, what do I do? Like, I have a family here. Like, I can't defend my property. Like,
Yeah.
what the fuck, So, part of me is like I have my gun loaded right now, like ready to go in a
Yeah.
safe. Like, I'm not fucking around. Like,
Yeah.
like that's another thing about being a father. It's like, you have to be a protector. So I'm like, they're gonna tell me I can't shoot these things down, but I'm like, if a thing is like right over my property and there's more than one of them, like
Yeah.
I'm not gonna just let this shit happen all the time.
That's big enough to carry a
Yeah.
payload or weapons. You have no
Yeah.
idea what it's going to do.
No idea what this shit is, man.
Did you feel any energy or anything? I know that's like a fucking, what do you call it? Like a rinky dink topic. Like some people describe feeling like energies coming from
Yeah.
certain UAP sightings. Did you do you remember any sort of feeling coming over you besides the feeling of what the fuck is this shit and wanting to protect your family? Was there any sort of like energy you were getting from this thing?
No, I was mostly just like I need to get this on film because nobody's gonna believe that this shit was this close.
Yeah.
And like I said, it had like this low humming noise. So I mean, I don't know, I couldn't really see like how it was propelling. It was dark, but it was like a big fucking apparatus floating where I'm like, I need to get this on camera,
Yeah. Was it directly over your gym or was it sort of in the driveway
No,
area?
so it was like in between. So like here's the gym and I'm taking a leak here and I hear like a humming noise. So I'm thinking it's the gym and I just gradually look up and I look to my left and it's like over into the distance here, just like hovering, just floating there.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, what the fuck? Like I literally yelled it out loud, like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it's fucking strange, man.
Have other neighbors reported seeing similar shit? Like when you talk to the cop or
I talked to
anyone else on
him.
the
He
block?
hasn't seen it. So at first he's like, "Oh no, they're just aircraft carriers." I'm like, "Dude, no, they're not."
Aircraft carriers?
Yeah, he's just like they're airplanes and stuff. He's like, "Download this app. It like lets you know like what planes are floating ahead."
A plane 30 feet?
Well,
Or
no,
like,
it wasn't until I told him about the first
okay.
instance, and he's like, "Oh, you should just download the app. Like it, most of them are planes and stuff." I'm like,
Yeah.
All right, man." And then I told him about this, and I'm like, "Dude, this wasn't a fucking plane. This wasn't a plane." And then he's just like, "Oh shit." He's like, I'm hearing a lot more about it. He's sending me articles and stuff about like, you know, the one of the one of the state senators in New Jersey came out and was like, it's Iran or something like that. It's like a foreign entity.
Yeah.
Like everybody at
Some
this
like
point.
Iranian ship launching the drone.
So there was something where it was like all the drones look to be appearing from off the ocean.
Yeah.
And then they return every night and stuff like that. And like yeah, at some point you could go down an algorithm, you could go down a conspiracy, and
Yeah.
at that point I'm like, fucking A, there's so many different possibilities of what this
Yeah.
could be.
But it's wild because our military would easily be able to track the drones. Drones can only go so far on a single charge. Would we not notice a submarine or an aircraft carrier that's captured? Like they'd have to surface to recapture these drones, or there'd be like some huge carrier sitting out there on the coast of New Jersey. Like the military is just gonna let that happen. So
I don't know.
it's like the not being able to track it part to me
Right.
is the
Super
freakiest.
suspicious though.
Yeah.
that they can't do that. It's like, really?
Yeah. Because they either know exactly what it is, which I'd almost prefer, or
Right.
the United States military cannot track a simple drone that's overhead in someone's yard in New Jersey.
Yeah. And if it's UFOs, man, like, I just hope they come here today and they can abduct you and probe you and give you the royal treatment.
Yeah.
That's what I'm hoping for.
I hear that they don't know where to find Crazy by Conscious because this podcast hasn't hit the airwaves yet
Yeah.
in alien land, so they're like searching all over for the book. But the thing is that the yellow beacon can only be seen when you have a
Maybe
dildo up your ass. And
I
so we
think
have
that's
to tell
what
that to the aliens. The yellow cover of the book, they just can't see that visual frequency.
I think that's what's drawing them is it's like an insect in the night, being attracted to a lit light bulb.
Yeah.
They're coming here now, and now that we have this podcast, who knows if I'm going to be even alive after this?
I think
I'm
you'll
gonna
be more
expose them.
alive than you've ever been because you're gonna get the probing of your life.
I just hope that
You'll
they're
be brought up
nice.
to the ship.
Yeah,
They're gonna ask you to read a chapter as they probe you and they scan you and they try to figure out where your creativity is coming from.
yeah. I just hope they're nice. That's all.
And it's gonna be the alien's gonna take off his mask and he's gonna reveal himself to be Vin Diesel and he's gonna say, "I got you, motherfucker.
Fucking
You thought you
Diesel,
could write
man.
that shit about me? How about you take this fucking 4-foot probe up your ass, bitch? Family."
And then we're gonna have a dance off.
Yeah,
Yeah,
as with the
yeah.
probe up your ass. So it could be like a third leg. Do a lot of tap moves with that.
Ah, motherfucking Vin Diesel.
Well, Chris Cooper, thank you again for gracing me with your presence for round 3.
Yeah, man.
This has been an absolute blast up the ass. And I know people will love Crazy by Conscious. They should definitely go check it out. I cannot wait to dive into my hard copy while I'm hard, because that is
That's
the
the
only way
ultimate
to
goal.
read this book.
No, the ultimate way to read this book is completely nude in the dark to really enhance the reading experience.
Yeah, on 7 grams of mushrooms.
7 grand. Oh, that's a hero's dose.
Yeah,
Talk about heroes.
yeah. I hear if you pass 5 grams, the face actually leaves the page on the cover, and it sort of melds into your consciousness.
Yes. Yes. It's all by design. Absolutely.
Yeah. So just to reiterate, where can people check out the book?
Mhm.
Where can people follow you, keep up with your work,
Yeah.
all that stuff?
Yeah. So again, Crazy by Conscious debut novel. You can get it on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, anywhere books are sold. It might not be, front and center in your bookstore, but ask for it. You could always get it ordered to your bookstore. Right
Follow
now,
the drones.
yeah, the drones too. And it's going to be your only protection against the drones too, is if you cling to that book.
Yeah.
So it came out purposely to protect the people. I am a man of the people.
The only ones with the book that are clutching on to the book Crazy by Conscious, those will be the ones that are brought up to heaven when the apocalypse happens. We're going to be
Right.
taken up by God's light, clutching
That's
Crazy
funny.
by Conscious, and the rest of us will go to perish.
Yes. Yes. So if you don't want to read the book for content, just read it for your salvation. But get it on, I would recommend get it on Amazon because you get it in a day on Amazon Prime and there's no delivery fee or anything like that. So, but yeah, I'll be doing a Barnes and Noble signing end of January in the Ledgewood Barnes and Noble location. So it'll be good to, if you're in New Jersey, come on out, see me, I'll sign your copy. And then, who knows when I'll start writing again. This was a huge milestone. So I think I'm going to take a break for a little bit, kind of enjoy it. And then who knows what the future holds for creativity.
Chris Cooper, thank you, brother.
Thank you, Zach. Love you, man.
Peace out. Love you.
Thanks, buddy.